This is The Haunted House by IP Freely. Just kidding, but that would be awesome if that was our name. Alright guys, here we go. One time a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they would always get scared out by the haunt. So the preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire, lit a lamp, and sat there reading the Bible. Just before midnight he heard something start at the cellar, walk back and forth, back and forth. Sounded like someone was trying to scream and got choked off. Ooh, that almost sounded kind of dirty. Anyways, there was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, because they kinky motherfuckers. And finally everything got quiet. He must have jizzed on himself. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn. And when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What the fuck do you want, bitch?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little. And finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up, laid the book on the chair, and went back to mending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again. Step, 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 step. Up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who the fuck are you, bitch? Show me your ghost titties." The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do. Oh. And she just faded out. The old preacher waited. When he didn't hear any noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but was a brave man and thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch. He sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again. Slowly. Step, 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 step. Until it was right at the door. The preacher stood up, held his Bible out in front of him. The knob slowly turned. That's what she said. The door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, what the fuck do you want, bitch?" The haunt came across the room, straight to him. Took hold of his coat. It was a young woman about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, her titties were floppy as fuck, and the flesh was dripping off her face, so he could see a boner or part of her teeth. It says bones, but she was just choking on a big dick. That's how she died. She had no eyeballs. There was a sort of blue light way back in her eye sockets. She had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing it. She told how her lover had killed her for money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and eat that pussy and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of her little finger from her left hand and lay it down the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who murdered her. And she said, "If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid. You can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tired. She sunk down on the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. And then she let him bone him. The next Sunday, the preacher put the dick bone in the collection plate. And was certain, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up, rubbed and scraped and tore at the bone. Oh, no, that's terrifying. Trying to get it off. And he went to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him to jail. After the man was hung, dear God, that's actually what it says. The preacher went back to the house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock, or maybe I should say the heart cock. And he did, and he found a big sack of money, a big nut sack. And where the haunt had held his coat, the print of the tiny boner was burned right through the cloth. It never did come out. Ooh, shit, bitch. Happy Halloween, guys.